Welcome back to the deep dive. You gave us a really fascinating stack of sources this time, one that, well, it demands we completely rethink a fundamental area of human knowledge.
Mythology.
Mythology, exactly. But we're not here to analyze poetic fables or religious texts today, are we?
No, not at all. Our sources challenge us to treat myths not as stories, but as structures, as highly optimized functional data.
Okay, so a totally different lens.
But completely different lens. The mission here is to move past the superficial cultural packaging, the gods, the monsters, the magic, and to extract the algorithmic core from what just looks like symbolic residue.
So you're saying we're viewing myths as a kind of data format.
The ultimate robust data format, one designed for survival over deep time.
And the central, almost overwhelming thesis in these sources is that in the face of civilizational collapse, everything else fails. I mean, everything.
Stone erodes.
Yeah.
Technology rusts.
Writing systems become indecipherable. But myths, these stories that are just carried in the human mind, they outlive every monument ever built.
Which is where that one source gives us that amazing phrase, the cognitive hard drive of the human cycle.
It's a powerful metaphor.
It is, because it highlights durability over fidelity. I mean, when a society is in systemic decline, the ultimate survival tool for knowledge isn't a library.
Or a server farm.
Or a server farm. No, it's a format that can be instantly accessible and universally shared. Myth is, well, it's the compression algorithm of collapsing civilizations. It's adapted specifically for endurance.
Okay, let's unpack that. I mean, we live in an era of information explosion, of these vast, sophisticated archives. Why, when a complex system fails, does humanity default back to the most ancient and what seems like the most unreliable method of transmission, the oral story?
Because the infrastructure of complex knowledge is the very first thing to shatter.
How so?
Well, think of a massive library. It needs librarians, maintenance, climate control, stable governance, a shared language.
All these dependencies.
A whole web of them. And when the system collapses, all those dependencies just vanish instantly. Archives burn, institutions dissolve, specialization dies out.
And the written language itself.
It becomes useless ink on dead paper. So when that complex system of storage fails, we are forced to compress that entire library into a portable narrative.
Something that could be carried by one person.
Exactly, across long distances, for centuries. And this is where the architectural design gets really fascinating, the mechanics of this narrative compression.
So how does it work?
We can identify three primary mechanisms. The first is maybe the most crucial. Humans store patterns, not instruction.
Okay, what's the difference? Can you give us an example?
Yeah.
Let's say the knowledge was how to build a complex irrigation dam. What does that parable look like?
Well, the complex engineering specs, the flow rates, the materials, the calculations, that's all instantly lost.
Gone.
But the fundamental pattern survives. So the parable becomes the story of the great builder who, understood the river spirit.
So it's moralized.
It's moralized and simplified. He learned you must work with the water in the wet season to prepare for the drought. The technical details are replaced by these structural archetypes. Survival strategies become archetypes, and historical trauma gets compressed into cosmology.
That structural change is vital. And if pattern storage takes care of the intellectual content, what guarantees the transmission?
Oh.
Which brings us to the second mechanic you mentioned.
Emotional preservation.
Right.
Absolutely. We know empirically that data survival relies heavily on emotional resonance. I mean, a dry technical manual is forgotten in a week.
Of course.
But the sources show that stories coded in what they call survival emotion narratives about collapse, escape, rebirth, they're just far more likely to persist across generations. Fear, wonder, and hope are mnemonic super boosters.
And finally, there's portability. The thing that ensures it actually moves across space and time.
Myth converts events into intensely portable meaning. Think of a civilization's entire history as a massive PDF file. When the computers fail, the human mind is forced to compress that into a tiny, durable GIF file. The myth that retains only the essential movement. It's memory optimized for mobility and endurance.
But if knowledge is transmitted orally, it's inevitably subject to distortion. I mean, we call that the telephone game.
Right.
The sources suggest this degradation isn't random. It follows a predictable pathway they call the distortion curve.
It is. It's a systematic decay. It's driven by linguistic drift and the constant loss of contextual anchors.
What do you mean by contextual anchors?
As a society loses the tools or environments that were associated with the original memory, The story has to change to remain functional. We can actually track this degradation through 3 distinct phases.
Okay, so let's start with phase 1 right after the collapse.
Phase 1 is what the sources call literal narrative. This is survival code in its rawest form, and it lasts maybe 1 to 3 generations.
So it's still pretty accurate.
The data density is high. Yeah, the metaphor is low. The story is still historical memory. We fled the burning city of X and sought refuge in the caves, or the great machine broke and we had to relearn farming.
It's recognizable history. A bit traumatic, but history.
Exactly. But as time passes and that trauma fades, the literal facts start to crumble.
And what drives that shift into phase 2?
The inability of the 3rd generation to relate to the infrastructure that failed. I mean, they've never seen the great machine or the city of X.
So the story has to become metaphorical to stay relevant.
Precisely. That's phase 2. Symbolic narrative. It spans maybe 3 to 10 generations. Literal details degrade, names and places are lost, and metaphor just skyrockets.
The burning city becomes
the city of fire, built on hubris. The survivors become the people below, or the earth people. Strangers who might bring some residual tech become powerful gods or culture bringers.
So the event is still recognizable, but it's completely coded in allegory. Now, I want to pause here. If you tell a story about the City of Fire to someone who has no concept of metallurgy or urbanization, isn't that just a bad memory? I mean, doesn't that feel more like delusion than compression?
And that is the essential distinction the sources make. Symbolification is not irrationality, it is necessity. When literal logic fails because the context has been destroyed, the symbol preserves the functional relationship.
Okay, I see.
And in phase 3, this becomes extreme.
Tell us about phase 3.
Phase 3, mythic abstraction. This is 10+ generations out. Now the story is pure, untethered cosmology.
So floods are no longer about sea level rise.
No, they symbolize systemic cleansing resets. Sky beings are not forgotten pilots or leaders. They are teachers of abstract concepts like agriculture or morality. The original event, the collapse itself, is entirely lost, but the pattern survives. This is myth as deeply encrypted data.
So the specific memory is gone, but the coded instruction for how to behave remains.
And the beauty of that encryption is that it preserves relationships even when the literal facts decay. You might lose the literal fact that, say, our ancestors were 2 distinct tribal groups who merged after a great drought.
Right.
But the symbolic structure preserves the required social memory. The children of the sky married the children of the earth. That structural relationship, the union of 2 distinct groups for survival, that remains functional long after the facts are forgotten. What's truly astonishing is that if we analyze these encrypted data formats globally, we find certain myths recur universally across non-interacting cultures separated by continents and huge spans of time.
So these aren't cultural imports.
No. They're what the sources term cognitive fossils, patterns encoded into the human mind by recurring apical events.
The sources suggest there are 7 of these high-level cognitive fossils, patterns that repeat every time a complex civilization hits its limits. We focused on the 4 most instruction-rich archetypes for today.
Yeah, the ones that demand our attention.
Okay, let's examine the functional role and the encoded instruction of each. First, we have the myth of return to the mother, the reharmonization myth.
This is the ubiquitous Gaia, Pachamama, the Earth Mother archetype. It survives because it encodes the most fundamental survival instruction after a technological overshoot.
Which is?
Survive by aligning with the environment, not by conquering it. It's the memory of relearning how natural systems work after our artificial systems have utterly failed. It's a command to de-engineer.
Okay. Next, the dark reflection of that, the myth of the fallen city, the collapse memory myth. You're thinking of Atlantis or the Tower of Babel?
And these are not just simple moral fables about pride. They're civilization autopsies, rendered into story form.
An autopsy, I like that.
They preserve the structural memory of centralization, hyperspecialization, overcomplexity. The encoded instruction is clear and, frankly, chilling. All complex societies rot from the inside before they physically fall.
The tower reached the heavens.
Meaning its complexity became too distant from the ground realities of the population below. It lost touch.
The third is the widespread myth of 2 peoples. We see this everywhere. Conflict between people of the sky and people of the earth, giants and humans, those who live below and those on the surface.
This is the mythic residue of post-collapse bifurcation. When infrastructure fails, 2 dominant survival strategies emerge. You have the adaptive above-ground reverters, who quickly despecialize and reject the old ways.
And the others?
And the delusion-preserving descendants. often those who hid in bunkers or tried to maintain old high-tech systems underground. The instruction encoded is that these two different survival strategies will inevitably collide.
And finally, the most universal structural memory of all, the myth of the reset flood.
The sources are really clear on this. The flood is universal, not because a single, literal flood happened everywhere at once,
But because
but because collapse always feels like an inundation, cultural, informational, ecological. It encodes the structural memory of a universal cycle, reset, then a population bottleneck, then rebirth.
and the instruction.
Is the most direct of all. After collapse, start fresh. The old system, the sources warn, cannot be salvaged. So if we accept that myth is compressed data, we need a way to extract the algorithmic core. This demands a methodology.
Right, a decoding process.
And it has 3 steps: symbolic decompression, structural recurrence analysis, and the crucial step we need to define now, geological mythological triangulation.
What exactly does that mean in practical terms?
It means we don't just look for a flood story. We look for a flood story that matches the precise timeline, magnitude, and geological signature of a known event.
So you're overlaying maps, the myth map and the geology map?
Exactly. We align the symbolic structure with real-world data points, volcanic events, sudden sea level shifts, rapid climate swings. When all 3 align, we can locate a specific historical event, just one that's been distorted by time.
Let's apply this. Let's start with the Sumerian king list. Academics routinely dismiss the crazy time spans rulers reigning for 450,000-year lineages.
They call it propaganda, designed to inflate royal egos.
And it is,
Yeah.
if you read it literally.
But if you decode it as a compression algorithm, something else emerges. Those impossible spans aren't lifespans. They are compressed civilizational durations, merged leaderships, epical markers of prior cycles that the Sumerians inherited and simplified.
So 450,000 years could represent what?
45 prior civilizations, maybe? Or 45 ruling dynastic structures, all collapsed into one exaggerated number to communicate deep antiquity. The compression was about demonstrating the cyclical nature of power.
That reframes the entire document. We see a similar compression in indigenous memory. The Hopi emergence narratives, they describe not one but multiple worlds, destroyed sequentially by fire, ice, water, and corruption.
And if you triangulate that myth with the geological record of the last ice age, the alignment is striking.
How so?
The fire world aligns with global volcanic winters. The ice world aligns with known glacial advances. The water world aligns perfectly with massive documented mega-flood events from melting ice sheets.
And the corruption world.
Is the classic marker of systemic societal collapse. And their kivas, the underground emergence chambers, they're not random. They mirror the functional need for underground refuge by the people who followed that subterranean descendants model.
Okay, here's my favorite application of this theory, because it seems like the ultimate paradox. The Dogon cosmology of Mali.
Right.
These are people who, until recently, lacked modern scientific literacy, yet they had this incredibly detailed, abstract astronomical knowledge, specifically about the binary star system, Sirius.
If you see myth as compression, it's not a paradox. It's a fragment
A fragment of what?
of a previous forgotten scientific worldview. When literacy and sophisticated institutions die, certain key scientific facts can only survive by being translated into the symbolic structure of the culture. The Dogon didn't discover the binary star system recently.
They preserve the knowledge.
They preserved a fragment of it. It's highly abstracted, symbolic residue of pre-collapse science, encoded in star maps and protected by ritual and cosmology. To summarize the profound forensic power of this methodology, when the mythic structure, the story pattern aligns with the geological record, the physical evidence, and the systemic mechanics, the logic of collapse, we locate a historical event.
And we can do this now.
We can connect universal global flood myths to real, rapid sea level rise. Specifically, events like Meltwater Pulse 1b, which caused catastrophic, widespread abandonment of coastal settlements all over the globe. The memory of that immense trauma became the template for the flood myth we see everywhere.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, living in a complex society right now? The implication is that myths are not just stories about them, ancient people.
No.
They're a continuously updating map of recurring human cycles. They encode the structural failures and the necessary instructions for survival that apply to every high-complexity civilization, including our own.
These stories are a warning encoded in art.
A powerful thought.
And that brings us to the final, most profound thought embedded in these sources. We've talked about the recurring structural myths, the 7 cognitive fossils that describe how systems fail. But there's one myth that stands apart.
Okay.
It's the one myth that isn't tied to delusion or structure or failure. It's the one myth that all cycles inevitably rediscover after the reset.
And that is the myth of the IS. It's known as Tao, Brahman, the ground of being, the nameless.
It persists because it isn't a story or a belief system at all. It is pure reality itself. It's raw, foundational experience, unfiltered by narrative.
So what's its encoded instruction?
It's the ultimate non-decaying anchor. Only the IS endures. All stories decay, all systems collapse, and all human structures distort over time. Reality itself is the only lasting point of reference you have.
A profound instruction to end on. Treat the myths you encounter not as folklore, but as a map of forgotten history, just waiting to be reverse engineered. Until the next deep dive, keep decoding.